Attachment theory could be one of the most life-changing things that you have never heard about, or you may have heard about it, but we're going to talk about it today on Josh Langley Gets to Know with Joe Jackson King. Now, Joe Jackson King is actually the author of the award-winning book Station at Austin Downs. She's also a occupational therapist, which she does as a day job. But she's also the author of a book called Raising the Best Possible Child: How to Parent Happy and Successful Kids from Birth to 7. In it, she talks about attachment theory, and attachment theory it blew my mind, and it's going to blow your mind. So sit down, let's get to know Joe Jackson King, and let's find out how attachment theory could change the way you parent or just change your life in general. Joe Jackson King, thank you so much for joining me.
It's great, Josh. It's lovely to do it.
Now, look, we're going to talk about your book. I've got to get the title right. Raising the Best Possible Child: How to Parent Happy and Successful Kids from Birth to 7. Why wasn't this book around with my parents when I was young? That's what I want to know, Joe. But we're going to talk about that. But there's a particular aspect to that book, which is about attachment styles, which I want to get into in a second. But firstly, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, my writing story is a little bit different to most people's. So I wrote a series for radio, which was really trying to bridge that gap between country and city people. And I just thought if I could see the inside of my head and, what I think about and feel about, sorry, look at those hands, they would know that we were very much the same, country and city people. So I wrote a series for radio, one for Life Matters and one for ABC. That got sent, all my work there just got sent onto ABC Books, and they came back and said, could you please write a book about your life on Austin Downs? And in fact, just write us an autobiography. So I've sort of not had a normal publication thing. Background here, and then my editor had 2 little children, and she was always picking my brains about parenting and about child development, and she just said, is there a book with all this knowledge in it? And I said, well, I don't think there is one, about all the OT knowledge. And she said, well, perhaps you could write that. And then and she said, just send me, what you think you'd put in it. And then she sent back, that's fine. Actually, could you just do the whole of the child development research, please, Joe? I just want you to synthesize all of that and work out what's really important. Write a book for me on that, please. And that took me back to university. So I went and did a fellowship, and I wrote quite a formal synthesis across all the main branches of child development learning, and sent that quite proudly. Uni loved it, sent it quite proudly to the publisher, who said, no, we want it written in your voice, full of stories, the way you did the first book, which we just loved, but now you just have to completely rewrite this so it's not academic anymore. Thank you very much. And that was 6 years total, and I'm having little children in himself, and so that's sort of the story of the book.
So obviously, I've been an occupational therapist, and you came at it from the academic point of view. How easy or how did you find it actually turning it into something that Ma and Pa Kettle that could read, something that I could easily read?
Well, I was aiming at Ma and Pa Kettle, but in fact, because it kicks off with the attachment research, is actually quite difficult for some people to read. It's used a lot by practitioners. So this is a book that actually, some parents love, but it's in a lot of people's offices. So it's sort of a mix.
So it's a bit of a resource for professionals, as well as something that a parent could sit down and read once the kids have gone to bed and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, and use, because right at the back of the book, there's like a massive section on troubleshooting. So it's really, if you can't get into an occupational therapist, you're able to work out pretty much what to do.
Okay. Now look, I've done a few of these interviews so far, Joe, and this is the one I've printed out all these notes for, all these bits of paper, because it's like what we're going to talk about right now can get actually complicated, but I believe for me it can be life changing for so many people, especially parents who are going, am I doing well at parenting? Am I stuffing it all up? How do I know what's going on? And I think what the attachment style does is gives a completely new perspective to what parenting is. Because normally even though I'm not a parent, but I know lots of them, and I deal with the kids all the time and with the schools and stuff. But I know the stress that parents are under with, they are always coming from my perspective, from their perspective. What am I doing? How am I doing? What book do I need? What's going to happen? But I think attachment style switches it completely, and you look at it from the child's point of view, and then the resulting effect that has as that child grows up. And I think that's such a unique aspect, and that is life changing because it actually I think it empowers the parent to be able to do something in a positive way. Would you agree with that? Have I interpreted
I
that
think
correct?
I think that's terrific. I haven't heard anyone encapsulate it just like that, but I think that's terrific. It is the knowledge, but Josh, it's quite painful knowledge sometimes.
Mm.
It takes a bit of this is the part of the book I warn people about. And for some people, I say, I don't want you to read this part of the book unless we've got a psych lined up for you. This is tough stuff because it really is reflecting on your own experience of attachment as a child. And people often say to me, well, I had a pretty crappy childhood, so obviously I can't be a good parent. And that's not right. You can be a great parent even with a crappy childhood as long as you've reflected on all the painful stuff and you've come out the other side. It's that coming out the other side which is so hard.
Yeah, look, it's brave work, and I think to anyone who wants to go back and look at the attachment styles and what their childhood was like, and to not want to repeat that in their own parenting, I think that's the brave, that's the courageous, and that's life changing, and that stops intergenerational trauma from happening as well.
Yes. And to a very great degree, but do remember intergenerational trauma, Josh, is also written on our genes. So,
Yes, it is. Yes. But it's also the conscious that, I'm
yes,
just going not to repeat the same mistakes that my parents made that
exactly.
they have made. Yes. So,
And to stop yourself doing it in that automatic way, because it's not like you want to repeat what your parents did. So I don't know how far you've got through, but I'm very, very, very slowly in that talk about my own experience where my own family history had a very profound effect on how I parented. So, no one comes with a clean slate here. There's all these really subtle little things that have happened in our lives. So I was really good with my children, crying and being angry, being happy. I accepted a full range of emotions until they were about 5. And at about 5, kids will do this thing where they cry in this despairing, helpless manner, which makes them seem, I now realize, really vulnerable. And when they were about that age, I would suddenly be like, just stop that noise, just stop it. No more, that's enough. And I was dismissing their pain. I was trying to stop them feeling, and we can't stop feeling. All I do is make them shut it down. So, why was I doing that? Because I couldn't seem to stop myself. And right in the moment, that was the best mum I could be, was stopping them doing that. Well, what was going on? And so we have to look at not my childhood, but my mother's childhood, my father's childhood.
yep.
And yeah.
Because
And so,
all those things play a part all the way down the line, subconsciously or consciously.
yes. And so, at around 5, somewhere in my family, a despairing child or a very vulnerable child was not around a parent when they were crying and was not comforted, but was instead abused by an adult. It's pretty clear. So,
Yeah.
but nutting that out was terribly painful. Nutting it out.
Yeah.
But finally working it out and saying, okay, you know, this automatic response actually makes no sense. It's actually damaging. What's the other way I can respond here? And I was able to say, oh, it sounds like you're feeling awful. You're feeling really upset. And just sit with them with the emotion and connect to them emotionally, you know. But that's really a little thing. You imagine what some parents come to this parenting with in the way backgrounds, because I am a securely attached kiddie, you know, but some parents, you know, some parents have had a much harder time. They don't have the capacity to reflect and, you know, they're not reading the attachment literature, but as you said, you know, they can, it's there. They can even go online, Josh, and I think those questionnaires and everything are really good that you can find.
Look, they're actually good for helping sort of kind of understand. We can look what we're going to do very shortly. We're going to go through what the 4 attachment styles are, just so give people a brushstroke overview, and I'll talk about how by doing a test I managed to work out what my attachment style is. Well, the dominant one anyway, because you can be a blend of each one. So let's have a look. Okay, the most obvious one, which I think is the majority of people, is what we call the secure attachment. Can you describe a little bit about secure attachment?
Secure attachment is what occurs when a parent is predictable and warm and allows a child to have all their emotions. So it is simply how any human baby will respond to a parent who that responds to their emotions, that is predictable, and you know, basically pretty much always does the same thing, and is warm. That's
so it makes, you know, the child feel loved and safe.
Yep, that's it. Those are the two key things. Those behaviours make a child feel loved and safe. I've got to say, Josh, a child is always loved.
Yeah, I read that in your book, and I think that is one of the most. It's almost fundamental, and how like the primary caregiver or whatever loves the child, but it's how that is displayed or not displayed is what.
Yes, or how it's expressed, what they feel from their own experience of life and patterning is the best way to respond. It's really interesting stuff. So and none of these are good or bad. This is just how any baby their brain will pattern and their behavior will pattern, you know, in response to those particular behaviors by a parent.
Yep. So you've got secure, which is the main one, which is the majority of people, and you've got 3 offshoots or different ones from that.
Sort of. I understand this a little differently because I just a little bit, and so most people talk about you can't be secure. So there's actually 2, if you can imagine, 2 sort of dials. Can you imagine 2 sort of switches? And so one's only got 2 positions. Well, I mean, it's got 2 big positions. One is organised and disorganised. So organised means mum or dad is predictable. Disorganised means they are not predictable. Okay, this other dial here, which we're going to call the secure dial, switches from secure into insecure, and there's 2 types of insecure attachment, which depend on how the parent behaves.
Oh, okay.
And so you can be secure and also disorganized. So a parent can be loving and warm and responsive, you know, warm and responsive, but they can be not entirely predictable. And so this comes when you have got a parent who is living in a war zone and the world's not safe. This can occur when a parent is doing their absolute best, but they are terrified of something. So in a domestic violence situation, for example, you can have a parent who is warm and loving, but also scared. And when they're scared, they are not emotionally available to the child. That frightens the child. And so they're secure and disorganized. So if you just imagine 2 sets of dials there,
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
if that makes sense. And
Yep.
so that one can be in either position. So, but you can have one where it's either one of the two insecure and it's very, very disorganized. And that's the situation where the child tends to be scared of the parent. So the
Okay.
person who's meant to bring the child comfort is actually terrifying to them. And
Yes.
so
And
the child's brain can make no sense of that whatsoever. That is just a nonsense, and that child is left quite frozen.
yeah, I can
You know,
understand that because it is simple thing is you as a child you want to be feel safe and loved and so your primary caregiver is that source of that. And when that primary caregiver is giving you the opposite signals and you're frightened of them, then your brain and actually I think they've done studies to show it actually rewires the brain neurologically, which I think is
and everything rewires our brain neurologically, but those are big wirings. So
yeah.
secure rewires our brain. When you fell in love with Andy and you had that corrective attachment experience, your brain was rewired, Josh. You became a different person. That's how profound that attachment
I can imagine that
is.
would be, yes, yes, because
Yeah.
you finally find what you've been looking, well, subconsciously been looking for, and when you find it, it sort of doesn't make everything okay, but it provides a bit of a stable platform in a way.
It does. And, it needs a strong right brain to develop another strong right brain. And so a mentoring relationship does that. I mean, that will
Mm,
also transform both brains.
okay,
It's extraordinary how malleable and changeable and transformable we humans are through relationship.
and
Relationships are
that
the
description
ingredient.
gives us hope, doesn't it? We're not
Oh, it
stuck
does.
in this
No.
patterning. We can actually choose to make an effort to move out of that.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so do you want me to go back to
Uh,
my dials and my
Get back to your
attachment?
dials because
Or
because one of the things that I suppose I wanted to talk to you about is because all the literature they use different words and they explain it in different ways and you've explained it in one particular way in the book and I've done a bit of research even the words like fearful avoidant, which is actually the other word for that is disorganized. But you're sort of saying it's really you've got secure and you've got
well,
unsecure, which is disorganized.
yeah, I feel like getting pencil and paper too.
We need a
Um,
whiteboard. I've got one behind me.
whiteboard. So, yeah,
Because
it's
you've
just
all you've also got the which one is it? Which one? Dismissive or the avoidant.
yeah. So that's when I'm talking about two types of insecure,
And then
and
one of them's anxious, isn't it?
one of the names refers so each that they'll say something like preoccupied parent, ambivalent child. They'll say dismissive parent, avoidant child. So one's describing the adult behavior and one word is describing the response. So I
Oh,
mean, I went,
yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
I went right through all the science. So that book is a 2010 book, so it
Mm.
may have moved a little, but I don't think it's moved much because it was began in the 50s, and it was very, very good. I'm actually making a whiteboard here.
Okay, that's good. Because one of the things that I noticed was that there was the word that described the child, and there was also a word that described the later effects in adulthood of that style in the
Yes,
child,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and
No,
how the
I
traits
feel
could manifest differently.
I feel I've done so. And I was talking about the appendix of my book, which is sort of troubleshooting, which is a lot of it.
Mm.
So it is, I really very much went right through the literature and wrote questions to make that all a bit clearer. So I can read from that for you because it's it's helpful. But I'm now going to just
I want to see your impromptu
yeah,
diagram.
yeah.
Because
I'm,
one of the things that I've found, well, I'll just talk while you're doing that, is when I was looking through the traits as an adult, and you reflect back to the styles, it makes you go back, well, what was the childhood like? And you go, well, what am I like now? And one of the traits that I have now is I'm completely independent. You know, I've been independent all my life. I just rely on myself. I really hate collaborating with other people. I find that I don't normally like people
So
getting close to me.
So that is dismissive parenting that produces that.
Yeah.
So it's don't bother me, son, you know, and when you do bother me, I'm gonna pull away from you emotionally. I need you to be independent as a child so either mother can feel safe.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you displaying all those emotions and needs reminds me of all my unmet emotions and needs, and I can't handle it.
Mm.
You know, that's what's going on there.
Yeah, and I suppose that's one of the things people look back at me and go, "Look, Josh, you've just achieved so much, yada yada yada." But to me, it's
That,
the independence has driven me to keep going, to keep moving forward. Plus, also a bit of anxiety thrown in there as well. But and
yeah.
I see it as a good thing.
And you know, the people with that dismissive parenting often are our very high achievers.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
One of the things I've found very interesting, and I don't know very much about him, but there was a big article on Twiggy Forrester,
Mm-hmm.
who's one
Yep.
of this state. And he was talking about the fact that his mother just couldn't handle another baby. She was out in a station. And so she did her very, very best to lose that pregnancy. And yes, it was all in the Australian. You know, it's a discussed and known thing.
Mm.
Have a look at the level of high achiever that man's turned into. He
Yes.
really had something to approve, you know,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
show them. And here's my chart, which here we go.
Okay. Here we go.
Can you see
Okay.
that?
Yes.
So
You
you
got.
see I've done it as 2 dials.
Yep. Now, if you want to move it to the
Yep.
right or to the left a little bit, which one?
Is that
The other way. Move it the other way. I get my rights and lefts confused. Okay, so then we got the insecure, you got dismissive, preoccupied, and secure down the bottom, and the other one is disorganized and organized. Right. Okay, I see how that works.
And
I think.
that's how I understand it, because the problem is when you go through the literature, you do find those children who are both secure and disorganized. So those are children who, even though mums are warm and responsive, every now and then the mum is not available, or the child doesn't feel safe for some reason or another, and it will produce a child that fits there.
Gotcha.
And so war zone, you know, DV, sometimes children who need a lot of structure and parenting has been super permissive and there isn't the supports there, that child will also not feel safe. So all the time, and you'll end up with that sort of a picture.
Is that because the idea of boundaries is not as there
Yeah,
as
yeah,
strong these
that's
days?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. What about I mean, I suppose I'm just going to use myself and keep going as an example. Is that the primary caregiver, my mum, was unavailable, and she was also the cause of quiet fear because there was a bit of mental illness there, and my dad was just not around. He was a constant workaholic. So as a child, you had to just make your own fun, and that's, as I said before, that you become independent. But it's also is that you, as a survival technique, you learn to suppress most of your emotions, because if you, as a kid, if you whinged or got upset, you triggered the parents, and they couldn't cope with it. So therefore, and then of course you didn't get their love. And of course, as a kid, all you do is want to get your parents' love. And it's like suddenly you're not getting it. And so you're going to try and do everything you can to get it, like be nice. I was one of those kids that was just constantly trying to be nice to everyone. And which I think it's a good thing. But at the moment, but what it is, as an adult, I then put all of my needs to the back, and everyone else came first.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So I think that happens quite often for some people.
Oh, I think so. So of the 2 types, I would really say that your mum had been dismissive. Because if I read it through, a dismissive parent might say of themselves, I can't remember much about my childhood. I do sometimes find myself denigrating my parents in terms of their importance to me. You choose how important other people are to you. I find it hard to be close to anyone for any length of time. I'm generally a positive person, but I'm fairly prone to anxiety. My emotions don't get in the way of the things I want to do. I tend to keep a lot private, even in a close relationship. I can be a bit compulsive in the workplace because I'm a high achiever. I like to pick and choose when I receive or give physical affection. I don't like to depend on my partner. People trying to get too close make me nervous. I believe that if someone is upset, they should be left alone. And I find it annoying when someone wants to talk to me about my feelings. And they would say of their children, when my children are hurt, they prefer to be left on their own to work it through by themselves. I really don't like whingy, needy kids. I've trained mine to stay positive. It really makes me feel uncomfortable watching people picking up and cuddling their children over the smallest of falls. Those kids are going to get a rude shock out in the real world. I have taught my children not to be too trusting because life is unpredictable. My children and I don't engage in much physical affection. My children know how to keep a safe distance from other people. My children are more independent than other children in their same age. They stay close to me, but they don't ask for my attention all the time. If I come back from having been away, my children often don't even look up from what they've been doing. I have very clear memories of what happened when I tried to comfort my kids when they were toddlers, and it was one of those social occasions when people expected it. They actually leaned out of my arms to get away from me. We all tend to be very positive in our house. Things are okay. And my children understand I just can't stop when it suits them to deal with their issues. And I don't believe having a favourite child damages other children. And my focus with my children is helping them learn what they need to get on in life.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that is very much, that's those sort of attitudes.
That sort of stuff. I
So
think
it's
that
quite,
kind of describes my dad in a way, in a kind of a
that
thing.
describes your dad.
Yeah, very, very, because he had that kind of upbringing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's parents should
I
be seen,
do. And
kids should be seen and not heard, all that sort of stuff.
yes.
You know, don't give them treats. You know, punish the hell out of them, ignore them. They don't have emotions. We don't understand them. That sort of thing. And so then that carries
Yes.
on down the line.
And people think of that as traditional Australian parenting and tough love. And of course, it's just plain old harsh parenting, Josh. That's all it is. And I'm not saying they do it because they want to do it. And they don't want to be, they don't even think about that. They think of that as I'm setting him up or her up for success. This is how I show I love my kid. It just doesn't allow the child to develop optimally and show all their characteristics and be a full and rounded person. But it doesn't mean the parent doesn't love their kid. Do you want to listen to the other sort of
that. I
insecurity?
like that distinction because it's a lot of parents still worry because they think how they're behaving is a indictment of how much love they've got or how much love they're giving, which is not the case. They've got the
Not the
ample
case.
love. That's no one's questioning that. It's just
No, that's right. And often afterwards they're like, oh, why did I do that? I'm such a bad mum, and they beat themselves up.
But they're not.
But it can be, they're not. They just haven't reflected enough. And, the psych I work with is always saying to parents, and I don't actually want to see your children at this point. I just need some time with you. And this is the sort of stuff that a psych takes parents through. And that's often all that's needed, but it's quite painful work. Quite painful.
Yeah. Now you're going to read something?
I said, so if that sort of resonated with you, we would probably say that's dismissive parenting, and the result is avoidant children. But there's another type of insecure, which is preoccupied. And a preoccupied parent might say of their own childhood, my parents probably shouldn't have ever had children, although I suppose they did their best. And I find myself thinking from time to time, in fact, quite often, that I wouldn't like them much if they weren't actually my parents. My childhood contained loss, adversity, and pain, and those wounds still bleed from time to time. Often when mum and dad do something without thinking about how it actually makes me feel. I'm still angry with my parents. Issues from my childhood are very much in play in my life. People sometimes feel I try and get too close and I scare them off. I can't cope on my own. I worry my partner's going to abandon me during a difficult time. My parents had favourite children. I tend to assume the worst of people rather than the best. My emotions sometimes get in the way of achieving my goals, and sometimes I find I've damaged a valued relationship due to an emotional outburst. And I find it very difficult to stay on an even keel if my partner's emotionally troubled. I want to be there for my partner, but I start to feel insecure myself, and I find that hard to hide. So that's how they talk about themselves. And when
Wow.
they're thinking about their children, they say things like, sometimes I feel my baby is rejecting me and that he doesn't actually like me at all. I find it next to impossible to be consistent in my parenting. I never know if it's for real or if my children are just crying wolf. It's an emotional roller coaster at our house. My children don't like me to go anywhere without them. And of course, that's normal for children, under 4, really. My child is my best friend. My child looks after me. My children don't explore. They stick right next to me. My children fight with each other a lot of the time. I do have a favourite child, even though I know it's not a good thing and everyone in the family knows who it is. If my children are really upset, it leaves me feeling completely swamped and unable to help them. On bad days, I think my children would be better off without me. Sometimes one of my children reminds me so much of another family member I'm angry with, and it affects how I treat him. I believe you don't have to have the same rules for different children. My children are really hard to comfort, and if I've been away from them, people tell me they only started playing up when I entered the room. They'll be good for everyone except me. My children tend to have wild emotional swings. I don't like my children to go far away from me because we live in a dangerous world, and when my children seem not to need me, I feel great hurt. So we've got all these different aspects in our parenting. Even as a secure parent, people are going to be resonating with some of that, and it's useful to reflect on it. So yeah, and
Yeah.
on top of that, we've got the disorganized, organized thing. So
Yeah.
you can
Okay.
be organized, preoccupied, organized, dismissive, organized, secure, or you can be disorganized, because that's the safety bit.
Yeah. I'm hearing you talk about that and read those passages. I could pick up elements because you can be anywhere on the whole thing.
Yeah,
I get because you
yeah,
bits of this, but there's a dominant sort of feature that you've got plus different elements coming into play. Um, and that's why I think the awareness of this can be life changing for so many people. Um, and you've got obviously in the book you got more of those anecdotes and those sort of stories, haven't you?
lots and lots, lots and lots and lots. Once I was told that there had to be other voices. There were there were other voices, and I've also written sort of autobiographies in a sense, just
Mm.
to help a bit further there.
What sort of,
You know,
look, it's been 10 years since the book's been out. What sort of feedback have you had? What have you people got in contact with you saying, thank you, Joe, for writing this?
quite a bit, quite a bit. But Josh, because of being on the station and also because of having my little problem with getting out there,
Mm.
I've got a bad habit of thinking when the book's written, I've done the job, which of course is not right. You're meant to sell it. So I didn't really do any of that, I'm afraid. Um,
It's never too late,
you know,
you know.
oh, I know. I'd probably rewrite the section on how we learn to read,
Mm.
because I've learned quite a lot more about that. Yeah, and I'd probably add in, mix in polyvagal theory and with this attachment stuff, which I think
Mm.
would really help. But yeah, no, it is a really good book, and I get a lot of feedback,
Well,
very positive feedback.
well, you can always approach your publisher and say, I'm going to do a 2020 updated version, and they'd mostly jump at the chance.
Well, they might.
And then you could, just go on tour. And I suppose look, I'm coming at it from a selfish point of view. I believe that so much information there is so vital and can help so many people. And and bringing that awareness into modern day parent. Look, even if you don't even have kids, but you can arrest whatever you're feeling or go deep into what you don't even know you're feeling and change that to make your life the best it possibly can be. And that's the information in this book and about attachment styles that I found really, really interesting. And it's, even though as you said, it takes bravery to go into it, because you go into these parts of you that you push down deliberately because you don't want to experience them, because when you feel that emotion, it is so painful, you go, I don't want to go there. But you know what? Sometimes when you go there and you release it, it's the most cathartic, liberating thing that you can do.
Look, it is. And do you know, just pulling on another part of my life, which is working with people with dementia, you know, and as you get older, I mean, just ignoring it, particularly if you can't, we talk about tigers with dementia. So you have people who are quite happy with dementia, but if you have sat on all of this and you have never dealt, out come those tigers when you're demented.
Oh,
So
really?
they'll get you in. Yeah, really heartrending stuff. It's because you've lost your inhibitory control to push it all down, you see.
Oh,
So yeah.
I never
So
heard
I mean,
about that. Wow.
no, quite well known. So I feel, you know, for yourself, you know, that will get you in the end. You know, have a look at some of the links with some of our lifestyle diseases and stress, and the stress of not having dealt with this. You know, you can not deal with it, but there are consequences for not dealing with it. It is worth taking on the pain.
Yeah.
But it's really hard, and it's a bit like a marathon, and you know, you've got to have nice snacks in your backpack and people you're staying in touch with, and you know, someone who's holding your hand to some degree, and someone outside the situation. It is tough. It's a tough walk, but you know, the people who make it are so proud of themselves out the other side. And you know, as I said, that corrective attachment experience can happen at any time, and you know, you can heal things with your kids.
And that's why I kind of wonder why, you know, I'm quite level-headed to a certain degree as I am, and I think it's because the relationship I've got with Andy, it's that corrective thing, and also the fact that, I don't know, I just keep moving. But I think getting back to what you said just then, the journey, the marathon, if there was only a way, because I know that to go into this, you really need to clear space. Like, you need
Yes.
to have a clear space to make a safe space to do this kind of work, because it envelops you in a not in a good way. In the end, it will be a good way, but you've got to go through the dark night of the soul to get there onto the other side. But for a lot of people, they don't have the time or the money to have that safe space, to push things aside, to go, I'm going to really work on this. You know, I can't afford to take a month off or a couple of weeks off or a year off work, or push the family aside, or anything like that. Is there a way that people can
Well,
do it?
I would think, yeah, I think it is doable. It depends what you're dealing with. I mean, if we're dealing with, you know, abuse and trauma, you know, of really nasty kinds, I would recommend a professional, but they've got to be the right professional. But a very good friend is also good. I actually wrote a little bit about that, but I think you can also keep a diary.
Yep.
You know, writing. I would think that, you know, I've recently come across a book, which is that book on creativity, which is sitting by my bed, and I'm not doing it, but it's got a lot of the right sort of, and it's all writing. It's like these morning pages where you just write what comes into your head.
Is that
And that's
the Artist's Way by Julia Cameron?
Yes, I reckon you could combine that. But what did I?
Yeah, no,
I did. Yeah,
writing,
this is what
journaling, all that sort of stuff is so important in that regard.
so important. So I've written here, it's never too late to start on the project of changing your brain. Here are some of the principles that have worked for other people. So I have, again, gone through the literature and talked. Forgive. See your own parents as inheritors of intergenerational patterns too. And if you can step back to see it from that intergenerational perspective, becomes a lot easier to jump off the tracks laid behind you and ahead of you in your parenting, you know? You can get off that train track. Try and decouple the heavy load of anger from the past that you're pulling with you. Look at your own engine room and examine what's driving you to behave in a way you don't want in the present. Try and see things from a symbolic perspective and try and usefully study your own behaviour. And this is why I'm thinking those morning pages would be really good here. You know, for example, rather than, being distressed and overwhelmed when for example, when I said, just stop crying, just stop it, stop, I don't want to hear it, just stop it. Rather than saying, I'm the world's worst mother and catastrophizing, saying, and I wonder why I did that. Why do I keep doing that? Try and study it.
Be curious about it, yeah.
Be curious. When we, there's this PACE model, which you've probably heard about, which is how you deal with a traumatized child. And it's about playfulness, being accepting, being curious and being empathic. Try to treat yourself that way.
That's the hardest thing for people to do, is be kind to themselves, Jo. You know that.
I do know that.
But it's so important that they try.
So important. And when you're working through this heavy emotional stuff, don't go and try and talk to your mum and dad or anyone else involved. Those confrontations tend to just keep you mired in the patterns. So,
but could you? I'm going to ask you a question here. Could you ask them? Say, if you don't know much about their own past, you could just ask them about what their past was like.
Absolutely, and that's being curious and accepting. But it's not saying, gee, Mum, you must have yelled at me an awful lot when I was 5 for me to be doing the same thing to the kids now.
Yeah, that doesn't achieve anything at the moment, does it?
Doesn't achieve anything. No, just taking the anger out. And Josh, one of the things, I love your books. I love your books. One of the things I'm saying to parents as I read them through, because that one about emotions, it's okay to feel the way you do. What I love so much about that, and I don't know if you went and looked at it, but, cry. It's good to cry. And then when you've got to anger, a lot of people will say things like, well, go and hit something, go and yell, vent. And in fact, the research is so clear that only keeps the feeling going. With anger, you want to, as you say, breathe, gently let it go, look at it. I don't know how I got into that, but I did want to say that. I just absolutely love that. And that's something I pull out when I'm saying to parents, look at this. And they just look at me and they haven't known that different emotions are handled best in different ways. And you've got that so right.
I suppose for me, that section of that book, the biggest thing for me that I wanted to bring into that was bring awareness of how anger feels in the body. Because we don't notice how we just get angry and then we react without going, how am I actually feeling? Am I feeling hot? Am I feeling cold? Can I think what's happening? How is this energy moving in me? And that's the awareness of the anger. And that is the changing bit.
Yes. No, you've just done that so well. I'll probably have a whole list as you work through all your stuff. I'm going to have but the best writers for children, do you really find the attachment pattern thinking? You read something by Roald Dahl, and he is so often modeling a very secure attachment between parent and child. He's modeling that. And you think of some of Mem Fox's stuff. It's really explicitly about that relationship, and it's enjoyable for the child, but it's like a little love from the parent, the parent that is the writer to the parent who's doing the reading. But going back, I also think it's really useful to think about the role of the heart in empathy and thinking. Like, so much of this stuff is embodied, which is just what you were talking about, how it feels in the body. And so not only is the sort of the emotional and the words and the facial stuff missing from our parenting when we're trapped in one of those insecure patterns. The body part of it is as well.
Yeah.
Um, and so in a securely attached mother and child, we'll see baby's upset. Mum is able to drop her heart rate and sort of mirror, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. And her dropped heart rate drops baby's heart rate.
Mm.
All
I've
that
heard
sort
about
of
that.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I've written a lot about that in there too, but that's the other part. And it's so important to think about bodies in our parenting.
I like that because so much we neglect the bodies in the overall scheme of things. We walk around and we gather our way in our heads, and our bodies are secondary in a way. And I'm a living example of that because I live in my head most of the time, and I've got to keep reminding myself, oh, I've got arms, I've got legs, I've got feet, and but when I return to this space, it is quietening. It's kind of enjoyable. It's nice, and I think that kind of I think that's somatic. What they call somatic, kind of very being in the body, is really therapeutic. But that's one of the ways people, when they address trauma, because trauma stays in the body, as you know, and
Yes, Peter Levine's work. Yes,
I've got this book
that's
here.
good.
The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, who wrote it?
That's by
Is it Peter Levine? No, Bessel van der
no,
Kolk.
Bessel van der Kolk.
Fantastic.
Yeah, van der Kolk. So I'll
Yeah.
put that. I haven't read that yet. I'm about to read it because that's got some really interesting information in there, resources for about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Look,
Yeah.
Joe, we could keep talking like this forever.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm going to
How
do
about-
is I'm
Yeah.
going to put down the link down below here where people can go, or put it in the YouTube link or something, so people can do their own little test to find out what attachment style they are. Also, for more resources. Plus, I'm going to put the link to where you buy your book. Is it which publisher is it?
It is HarperCollins, this one.
HarperCollins. Okay, I'll put the link up down below here, and so people can grab a copy of the book. And I think it's an ebook as well as a physical book. And you can also try and get it out of your local library, but I think
pretty much all libraries.
But I think it'll be actually more important to actually have a copy because you're going to keep wanting to go back to it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people say that to me. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent as a resource. As you said, you got all the information at the back of the book, the troubleshooting. I love that, troubleshooting my parenting style. I love that.
Look, lots of things. Anyway,
look, Joe,
we're wrapping it up,
up,
aren't we?
Yes, we are, because I could talk forever. You know that. So, look, thank you so much for being with me, Joe. And I reckon I'm going to get you on again. We're going to go into this a bit more and get some other perspectives and angles. But for the moment, thank you so much for being here with me.
Josh, it's been great fun. Stay well.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Hi, thank you very much for watching the latest episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. Got any questions, whether you want to say whether you liked it, you didn't like the interview, and like my hair's too grey or something like that, post a comment below. I won't get upset, okay? Now, gratuitous plug here. If you want to grab my books, Been You Is Enough, Okay to Feel the Way You Do, or Magnificent Mistakes, or all three, just go to my website at joshlangley.com.au, because it's about trying to change the world one book at a time, helping one kid just to feel good about who they are and feel good in their own skin. If we can just help one child, then they may help another child, then another one, then another one, and then that's how we slowly change the world. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next episode.